I work when I sleep.
Like you quit your job and then you started working on the brand.
How do you stay positive while dealing with so much? Like there's nobody emailing you.
Wow, that's some amazing advice right there. I love your perspective on that. It's time to get loud. Welcome back to Loud Talk with Lavi, a podcast where we break down the walls of beauty standards one flaw at a time. And today I have such an amazing guest that I'm so excited to talk to, Priscilla Tsai. Thank you so much for joining me on Loud Talk with Lavi.
Oh my God, thank you for having me.
It is so great to speak with you and kind of get to know you. I'm really excited for that. Right off the bat, just if you can tell like me and the audience a little bit about yourself, that would be amazing.
Yeah, sure, of course. Well, thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here. So I'm Priscilla, the founder and CEO of Cocokind. I have been, really building Cocokind for the past 8 to 9 years.
Wow.
So it's really been an amazing, long journey so far, and we're still going. But a little bit about me. So I grew up in Michigan, so born and raised in Michigan, and grew up with two Taiwanese immigrant mom and dad, and my parents came here to pursue their master's and PhD. They met here, and they ended up in Michigan, and I was born there, and really loved it there. I was like such a Midwesterner at heart, even though people think I'm such a I like give off East Coast vibes, but I went to school in Philly and New York,
Okay.
or Philly, and then I moved to New York for 4 years after school. Since then, though, I've been in San Francisco building Cocokind. So, um, and I have an amazing husband here and two little boys. I have a almost 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. And so basically between work and then, family life and everything, like that's pretty much like my entire life right
Yeah.
now. And really, really fortunate to have like a lot of amazing support systems in both worlds. So, but yeah, really happy to be here today.
That's amazing. Well, I'm definitely excited to get into all of that and go into more detail and everything. So first off, you said you mentioned going to school on the East Coast. What did you do in school?
So I majored in finance and accounting,
Okay.
and I went to an graduate business school. And kind of the long story is that my mom is a small business entrepreneur,
Hmm.
and I grew up going to her office. I grew up stuffing flyers and kind of like stapling her catalogs and stuff like that. And so I, very much was exposed to this idea of business from like a really, really young age, like,
Right.
4 years old. And so for, my whole growing up, I always said that I wanted to have a business. And
Mhm.
so I decided to go to business school, an undergrad business school. And, but I didn't really realize that going to business school means, it's not really business, it's like a lot of finance. So a
Yeah.
lot of ending up in like investment banking and, and sales and trading. And so I kind of just like, I was so young and I just did that. And all of a sudden I like, before you even look up, I just found myself like recruiting for banking jobs and stuff like that when I was in college. And so
Hmm.
I actually ended up working in finance for the first 4 years of my career. And the most recently, before I started Cocokind, I was at JP Morgan,
Okay.
and I was an equity research analyst. And equity research analysts are people who basically like analyze a stock of various companies and different sectors that you focus on. And, you help provide some research and some guidance on, what basically you think the stock will do to investors. And so that's basically what I did. It's a really cool job actually for especially for recent graduates, because I got to like meet with CEOs of
Hmm.
companies. I mean, I was like the tiny analyst in the corner of the room taking notes, like definitely not talking, but I was in the room
Right.
listening to like really amazing CEOs of these public companies talk about their businesses. And I actually and I covered Whole Foods stock, and that was a company that I was really inspired by because so much of their platform is like using business to further impact. And
Mm.
I was really inspired by that, entire like very mission based company. And so that was like a big reason where, a big kind of propeller into why I also kind of doubled down on like I want to start my own business one day too.
Hmm.
So yeah, so I kind of did that for 4 years, and then I ultimately started Cocokind.
Right. And take me back to kind of the beginning days. Like you mentioned, you grew up seeing your mom in that small business
Mhm.
entrepreneurship role. And did you kind of know from a young age, like, I want to kind of also be an entrepreneur?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I don't even know why, but I was really like that was just my thing. Like I always knew that I was very exposed to business,
Right.
between both my parents. I think both my parents are, really excellent business people in completely different fields and totally made it on their own. And so, me and my siblings were all exposed to business and work and hard work and,
Hmm.
kind of making it for yourself like a really, really early age. And so that definitely made me want to become a business person. I think I was like 5 years old when I would tell people that.
Right. No, I love hearing that because I definitely grew up with like a similar perspective. And it's interesting how, like, I never knew exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew it was going to be something that I kind of like create on my own.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
but like I never really knew, okay, like what is that going to be? You kind of just like, I think, I don't want to say fall into it, but you kind of like just build the path along that way. And what you mentioned with school too, like taking business right now, like I can say the things I learn in school and the things I learn like, on my own is completely different. Like it goes from like textbook theory to like actual real life
Yeah,
application. So it's so different than actually like doing business like in the real world, I think. Obviously,
totally.
you need the theory and like all the accounting and financing. It's definitely important to know and understand, but it's a whole different world. I do want to ask you because you mentioned, how after 4 years of working kind of more of like a corporate job, let's say, um, did you kind of know like during that time, was it there kind of like a timeline for you, like, okay, I'm gonna work this job for let's say 4 years, like you mentioned, and then I'm gonna start my own business, or was it more kind of an
It,
overnight thing?
it wasn't, it's kind of, it's been so long that
Mhm.
it's kind of like I have to go back to like what my train of thinking was.
Right.
It was 2013 is when I quit my job at JP Morgan, August. And so, over 10 years ago now. And I think for me, it was the idea that I knew that I was going to start a business,
Mhm.
um, and I almost was so naive that I felt confident enough that that was the right time.
Mm.
And people who know me, like I am a quick decision maker. I am somebody who I wouldn't say necessarily like well, it's definitely a defining characteristic that like I am somebody who like walks the talk. Like if I say that I'm going to do something, like I'm going to do something.
Mm.
And so I think that it just became this thought in my head, and I was really kind of naively confident. I kind of had this whole like growing up of like years and years of thinking I'm going to do something and be like, yeah, this is it. And I didn't even like, to your point, like it was a little overnight because I didn't even really think too much about it. And thankfully, I also um, I had really supportive parents who were like just very emotionally like, yeah, like, they didn't even really understand what I was doing, honestly, but they were just like,
Mhm.
they tell me like they knew that I was going to figure it out, so they were very supportive of me quitting my job generally, which like, quitting a six-figure job
Yeah.
when you're like 24, because I graduated when I was 20, and so it's really young, right? Or 24, 25. And it's a kind of a big deal. And like a lot of like, not to stereotype, but a lot of traditional Asian families would be like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
I think I'm really lucky because I had very entrepreneurial parents who
Mhm.
like totally got it and they believed in me. Some even if they questioned me, especially when I was sitting at home as like a 25-year-old in Michigan in their home and like watching Bravo TV at Friday night and like on my laptop, they were like, "What is she doing?" She went from being like so independent to like now being at home, like,
Right.
and there was a period there where they questioned it a little bit, but they were always very supportive, and I was really lucky to have that.
That's so amazing to hear. And like you said, I think there is, a lot of like pressure on that. I know even for myself now, people ask me, okay, so are you gonna get a like engineering job like after you graduate? And I did like an engineering internship. I kind of got a taste of like that world, but I just think I want to like get my degree and then kind of keep moving forward with what I've built up on my own. And if all else fails, I can always like go back and get a
Yeah.
traditional job, but might as well give it a shot. And every time I mention that, people do kind of like look at me kind of weird because they just like don't understand it. I would say by now my parents they understand what I do completely in this
Yeah.
influencing world and all of that, but it definitely took time. I remember like the first time a brand wanted to send me PR, they were like, "This is a scam. There's no way this is
Right.
like real."
Right.
But
Right. Right.
now they get it. So that's so amazing to hear that your parents were supportive in that. But how did you feel during that time? Like, was there any fear? I know you mentioned kind of that feeling of like being a little bit naive, jumping fully into this world, but was there any fear in the back of your mind, like, what if this doesn't work, you know?
Not really. Again, I was so naive and so like hungry and ambitious,
Mhm.
and I believed in myself.
Right.
So I knew that if one thing didn't work, then another thing would, and
Hmm.
that I would land on my feet. I think yeah, I think I had enough like examples, even though they were smaller examples for sure, but I had enough examples in my life of like things that I had overcome, or things that, I kind of not landed the way that I thought it was going to land, and it still landed on my feet at the end of the day. And so I don't know, I always kind of believed in myself.
That's good to hear. And do you think that's kind of a characteristic that, the majority of entrepreneurs should have to be able to kind of be successful in that path?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think it's funny because I think that a lot of entrepreneurs, I mean, at least speaking for myself, I definitely have a lot of belief in myself, and there's an optimism that you can't really like. There's a special like founder optimism that so is, it's necessary to do the job. At the same time, I'm like also a very critical person too,
Mm,
and in some ways can be like pessimistic in some ways, and it's kind of about balancing those of not pessimistic, like I don't not believe in myself, but you're always kind of expecting the worst and you're preparing for the worst. You're a little bit paranoid all the time. And, I also am like a really critical person generally. And so, if something is, that I'm seeing that I could have done better or whatever it is, like I'm definitely like really in tune with that. So you kind of have to like quiet some voices and you have to amplify some others, and it is a little bit of a battle in your head of like, kind of how do you stay positive while dealing with so much, because you really, it's not an easy journey, and you are constantly dealing with problems. It's just not normal, and you have a lot of responsibility. And so I think I think the optimism and the positivity, the self-belief is absolutely, necessary, because there's so many other emotions that will constantly tug away at you.
definitely. And at the start of Cocokind, did you kind of go fully at first into it, like you quit your job and then you started working on the brand, or was there a bit of overlap there where then you decided to go full time with working on your
Mhm.
business, or how did that look like?
Yeah, so interestingly, so when I left JP Morgan, I actually started this distribution business of US organic goods to Hong Kong.
Okay.
So it was like organic, like vitamins and children's vitamins and snacks, and from these like independent companies that were then I would literally put on a pallet myself, because going back to, I covered Whole Food stock. So I would go to these like industry trade shows, and I would meet a bunch of these like really cool companies that were brand new, and today they're huge. They're all these like amazing companies that we know today that were like changing the food movement using really amazing ingredients, and healthier ingredients. And that market was still very new in Asia and Hong Kong, but there was a demand for it. But the thing is, a lot of these small companies, they wouldn't like ship directly to Hong Kong.
Hmm.
They would, it's just like they didn't know how to do that. But if they talked to me when I was going to the trade shows, they would happily sell me, and I wouldn't buy that much. I would sell, I would buy maybe 200 units or 300 units or something. And then what I would do is I would just pack that up and consolidate it and ship it to these relationships in Hong Kong that I literally made going door to door. So after JP Morgan, I spent a month in Hong Kong, and I literally got like this like importer list of like Hong Kong natural and organic stores that are like trying to, carry these like, imported goods. And so I literally went door to door, and I ultimately found, not a lot, but I had like 5 to 10 customers there. that had a bunch of stores on the island. And I basically ended up, being able to consolidate these like U.S. goods to Hong Kong, and I would like palletize it myself. I had a mini warehouse, and that helped me with my basic like day-to-day expenses. And I did that while I started Cocokind, and
Right.
that was kind of like what held me over in terms of like just having dollars to live on and all that stuff. And so I actually did that for even after launching Cocokind, I still did that for like a year.
Okay.
But I ultimately, sunsetted that business. But I kind of had that business to carry
Mm-hmm.
over while I was building the brand and the products.
Wow, that's cool to hear, kind of that journey. And I really want to ask you about, how you mentioned you were 25, like sitting at your parents' house. So during that time, like, were you kind of on your own when you were working at JP Morgan? Then did you move back in with your
Hmm.
parents? Okay. Because I
So
want to
I
ask about that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I lived in New York and I quit my job. And then I went to Hong Kong for a
Hmm.
month. And then after that, I spent like 3 months, 4 months in my parents' house, growing up in Michigan. And I would like work at my mom's office, like on my own thing, but I would just set up shop there
Yeah.
and I would go with her to work every day. And yeah, I was like single at the time, and like my mom was like, "Oh my God, like what is she doing? She's in Michigan." She was like living so independently, had this like,
Right.
fun social life in New York and working a lot, and but having a social life, having so many of her college friends, and like I moved back home to Michigan. I didn't have any of that. And so,
Mhm.
I was kind of like on my own, like very isolated land with my parents, and I had a great time with them. Like I still remember going to Japan with them that winter for Christmas, and like I was joking, like it's the three of us, and like they were just like, like I hope you get married one day.
Yeah.
They were like, is she gonna like, like have a social life?
Right.
Um, but then I ultimately left Michigan because my mom was like, hey, maybe you should like go stay with your sister.
Mhm.
Because she lives in San Francisco, and that she's like, there's more young people in San Francisco.
Right.
So my mom was like, maybe you should go like crash on your sister's couch. So I then moved to my sister's couch for a couple months in San Francisco. And then I ultimately like rented my own place in San Francisco. But yeah, so I had like almost like 9 months ish
Mhm.
of like this like transition period, whether it was on my my old bedroom, growing up bedroom, or my sister's couch.
Right. And I wanted to kind of, bring that up a bit more once you mentioned that, because I feel like a lot of people in their 20s feel like, I don't know, some sort of weird way, and they feel like they're taking steps back if they're like going back to their parents or going
Yeah,
back to their
totally.
hometown. And that's why I wanted to ask you about that, because I think a lot of people feel like that judgment. There's really like no reason to feel that way. There's
Mm-mm.
circumstances where that's just the best option to have. And I think it's great that you're very open and talking about that. And I think to anyone listening, that's going to be a great, like, inspiring thing to hear, that it's okay to do that, and like, your
Totally.
life isn't over in those
No,
in
and
those
I
moments.
remember it was weird for me to like during that time period of, especially when I was in Michigan, not so much when I was in San Francisco, but people were definitely like, my friends and everything, they were just like surprised that I was like in Michigan.
Mhm.
But again, I didn't really care, like I
Right.
was like, I knew that I was on path. I knew it was a stepping stone. I knew I had shit to do, and I
Yeah.
was like, I wasn't going to waste money while doing that. And so, like, that's the thing about me too. It's like, I'm always very authentic to myself. And like once I don't know, I feel pretty secure in those decisions, even if it feels contrarian or a little bit weird or a little
Hmm.
bit like off. And sometimes you have to do what you got to do, and you have to be like, shameless about it,
Yeah.
because ultimately it is a stepping stone, and there's absolutely nothing embarrassing about saving
Oh,
money.
absolutely. And I love that you're transparent about that, and the fact that you also said like you just knew your path and you didn't really care about what others had to say. And I totally agree with that. I was moved out last year, like throughout all my internship, and I just moved back home because it's easier while I'm in school. It's easier
Yeah,
for filming content. And I'm like,
totally,
might as well save some money. So
totally.
there's no shame in it, but just for anyone listening, that's a good reminder that there's no shame in that at all. So the next thing I wanted to ask you about is, obviously you already touched on saying like you really were in that mindset like where you didn't care about whether what other people thought, and you were on this path. And What's any advice you can give to someone who maybe is kind of wanting to take that leap of like a goal they have set out, but they're scared of like what other people have to say, especially in those beginning days when obviously you're having to put in a lot of work and you're not necessarily seeing like the huge return, and it can be stressful sometimes where everyone's friends and family's eyes are kind of on you and they're like, so how's the business going or whatever? Like, what's
Hmm.
your advice to anyone kind of going through that or like kind of fearing going through that if they haven't started yet?
Yeah, I think it's just to, again, believe in yourself and to, kind of dream really big, because like those in the beginning, no one is going to give you like affirmation, right? Like
Right.
it's really important to understand like being a founder, starting anything new or doing anything yourself, building anything is not like the job that you do if you're looking for affirmation. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's really a hard thing to do. It's a very lonely thing to do, no matter what. And
Right.
so you have to be that person to like dream big and to like have this like dream be your constant source of energy and confidence and ability to storytell and communicate. And that's where you yourself have to be the number one like believer and salesperson of this dream. So maybe you haven't started anything yet and you're like, instead of being like, oh, I'm not launched yet, like I'm it's coming soon, you could be like, I'm building this amazing product. I'm really excited for it to be coming out next year. Like,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like it's just a difference in tone and energy that you put forth where it can really be like a positive thing and you can come into it with confidence, not like this your own kind of skepticism or your own kind of like insecurities, which I know that like that's 100% there. But when you communicate it for yourself mostly, you want to communicate it a lot with like confidence.
Right. That kind of change in mindset of how you frame it. I think that's so important, definitely. What would you say are like the top traits that would differentiate, a founder? Because obviously not everyone in the world is made for like entrepreneurship or like being a founder, or else like obviously no company would ever work that way.
Hmm.
So what are like the top traits that you would say would differentiate someone from being a founder versus, maybe working out better in a more traditional job?
Yeah, I mean, I think, these days, like just the idea of like founders are so, unique and everybody has their own story,
Hmm.
and it really, everybody has their own story, their own journey, their own motivations. So it's a little bit hard to say overall. And I think, to be honest, I think there's a little bit of like a founder on pedestal situation, that's going on that is a little bit hard because founders, like everybody else, have insecurities, have weaknesses, have issues, personal issues, professional issues. Like there's a lot of things that, and by the way, like you can be just as successful, quote unquote, as a founder or not as a founder, contributing to the workforce. So,
Hmm.
I do want to like qualify that because I think that truly people don't really get it when it's out there and said that like it's truly not for everyone. And
Right.
it shouldn't be. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be. And there's so many ways to be successful, right? But that being said, I do think that like at least from what I've seen, one of the defining characteristics are um, people who are biased for action. It's like it's anybody can talk about an idea, anybody can say an idea, but it's the people who actually do it that make a
Hmm.
difference. And you don't even. I think that like a lot of times people with the most innovative ideas fail because they don't know how to act, and people with the least innovative ideas succeed because they know how to act. And it's like the action succeeds all. So that kind of to me is like what I've seen time and time again from people that I've known, that have amazing businesses.
Wow, that's some amazing advice right there. And to anyone who maybe isn't like as comfortable taking that like full leap of faith, like quitting their job or whatever, and they have all these ideas, what would you recommend that case? Because I always tell like my friends and stuff who have all these ideas, I'm like, well, just start working on it now. It doesn't matter if like you're in school or
Hmm.
at least just start somewhere, right? So I want
Yeah.
to get your perspective on that as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think, it's kind of the advice people when people are like, hey, I want to start something, I don't know where to start. It's like I didn't know where to start either, but you
Yeah.
start somewhere and you just do one small thing at a time. And I
Hmm.
think that's people like there is no playbook, right? Nobody's going to tell you, no, it doesn't matter how deep your network is, how many people you know, how many mentors you may or may not have. Like no one is going to be there every step of the way,
Yeah,
guiding you every hour of the day. And so
absolutely.
you that's a big part of like when I remember when I was just started Cocokind, you know, like your inbox is like zero. Like there's nobody emailing you, like it sounds today I have like tons of email every day. I'm like, oh my God, I have to like get to my inbox and like, reply to people or figure this out or do that. None of that is happening in the beginning. You're on
Right.
own and nobody is asking anything of you. And that's a really scary thing, right? And so you kind of have to figure out how do I put one foot in front of the other. And I think where people get the most tripped up is it becomes this overwhelming thing. Like I have to start. No, it's like, okay, well, you have to start with, you know what, today I'm going to just research what colors I love for my
Hmm.
brand. I'm going to research what ingredients I want to use. Like, I want to research what steps of products I want to launch with. Like, it's like just like one thing at a time. These are
Absolutely.
small things that are really exciting. And that's how I basically started was like I started with like one step at a time and every single day was like so exciting. I like love what I was doing. I love what I was learning. And I love like, oh wow, like it happened. Like I got, this, I don't know, what formula together or this or that. Like it was really exciting to see it all come together. And so that like was very much like energy for me. So I think my biggest advice is like one small step at a time can create like really big dreams. And so just try not to get overwhelmed by like thinking of these big steps that you have to take.
Yeah. I think also into that, like, yeah, for sure, just taking those small steps every day. Cause I know, I mean, I wouldn't say I like fell into this whole like business of content creating, but I started off just as like a passion project when I was like 13 on YouTube, and now it's just become like my full-time job.
Yeah.
But
Oh.
last year, like back in September, I launched my own skincare brand. It's mainly targeted towards men with my business partner. And I remember when we started like working on like just from the very get-go of like the starting idea to now, and every day we'd meet and then it'd be like, okay, what do we want to do today? And it's like we had so many things to do. And sometimes you're right, like it would get so overwhelming because it's like we have so much to do until we like could launch. That was our goal at that point. But we just had to like work on one thing at a time. And I remember when we launched, I did have a bit of that insecurity, like, what if this fails? What if blah blah, or like that comparison to like other brands and everything. And I remember he said to me, he's like, you know what, Lavinia, like we've started, like we launched,
Mm-hmm.
and that's like the first step. Like from here on out, like it's gonna obviously take work. And I'm like, yes, you're right. Like it's gonna take a lot of work, but it's just really about starting. And with that, I want to ask too, like, how did you kind of navigate, and if you had this experience at all, like the whole comparison game of, especially with like social media, I think, and kind of
Mm-hmm.
glorifying entrepreneurship in some ways. Did you at times like compare yourself to bigger brands or other
Yeah.
founders at all in that process?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I did and I do now,
Hmm.
like it's still a thing. And
Yeah,
I think it's a natural, like, human characteristic. It's
right.
unrealistic. Like I'm not gonna like, feel jealous
Yeah,
from time to time. I think what I through the years, because I've seen many companies come and go, I've seen many companies come and succeed further, quote unquote. And I think one of the things I kind of realized through time, because again, I have the luxury of having been doing this for a while, and just matured through this process very much. I kind of realized that like you can't everybody's like journey of like happiness is so different,
hmm,
and you can't tell everything. First of all, it's always what they say, it's half the story online, right? Like
right.
there's so much more that is untold and there's struggles that are untold. We all know that everybody has struggles that aren't shown, but sometimes it's hard to recognize.
Hmm.
But not only that, I realized that like my purpose and my like idea of happiness is really different than what somebody else is. And so, right now, like this particular journey that I'm on, like I'm really happy with, and I don't know, if that's something that like I can compare to other people at
Yeah,
all, and their happiness level. And I'm also like working for something different. So, and I think everybody has a different goal. So, again, it's like I try to remember there's a lot that you don't see. And also my particular goal, my particular like pursuit of happiness is really unique too.
absolutely. And just kind of recognizing like everyone's on a different journey, and like you said, like what makes one person happy might not make the next happy. So
Yeah.
that's a amazing perspective. With that, I want to ask too, like I think this could be helpful for anyone listening as well. What are some of the things that you think social media kind of glorifies about entrepreneurship, and what are more things that you wish people did know maybe before either going into it themselves or making a judgment on entrepreneurship? What's kind of your
Mhm.
perspective there?
Yeah, I mean, I think entrepreneurship is like it's what people expect. It's like it's really, really hard. I think what's shown on social media a lot of times is, a glorified version. So it's, a founder that is, has shit together in all the ways of life and that is out there on panels, marketing products, like running in front of a Target sign saying my products are here now,
Yeah.
and all that stuff, which is all those are all amazing, truly like amazing parts of the journey.
Hmm.
What aren't parts of the journey are the majority of your days, right? Like the majority, not only of your days, but the hours in the day are not those times. And you're dealing with problems, you're dealing with challenges, you're dealing with rejections, and you're dealing with a lot of anxiety. You're dealing with a lot of can't shut it off at night. I always say like I work when I sleep. And that's not like I'm not even like making that up. Like I will literally dream about work, about like real work things, and I'll be like, oh, okay, like so then I wake up being like, okay, yeah, I have to do this and this and this. Like I legitimately like have those dreams where I'm working.
Hmm.
Or I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm thinking about an issue, and like that happens most days, not some days, most days. And so like it's really a decision that you're making to
Hmm.
have a successful business.
Yeah.
The more successful you are, the more stuff you're dealing with, and more of an investment it is for your whole life. Like it's an investment for my partner, my husband, to be making that I have this business. It's an
Right.
investment for my kids to be making that their mom works so much. Like, it's an investment that we as a family are making. But also one that we're making for my happiness because it's what
Yeah.
makes me happy too, right? And so, but it is something that like it comes with a lot of costs, and I don't think
Hmm.
that is often showed. And of course there's a lot of people who do not have, it does not end up going the right way, and
Yeah.
that that also is like really painful. It's really, really painful, when things don't go the right way either. So there's just a lot, I think, psychologically that you have to deal with. Yeah.
What about like managing kind of expectations? Because if people do go online, they see like you mentioned those great moments of, the founder standing in front of their line at a shop or
Mhm.
whatever, right? And people might build up those expectations or kind of think that it'll be like an overnight success. Like,
Mhm.
what's your advice to kind of manage those expectations? And like you said, like you've been working on this for 9 years, I think you mentioned,
Mhm.
right? So what can you say to any young entrepreneurs that kind of feel discouraged when they're not seeing like that instant gratification come?
Yeah, I think again, it's, and I give this advice all the time. Like you should expect rejection. Like
Right.
that's the status quo.
Yeah.
Like a couple people actually over the past like couple months, like separately, have given me this, via DMs and stuff, and I try to get back to people, but just kind of like I've been facing a lot of rejections. Like, what advice would you give me? And my advice is like that's the status quo, like that is what you should expect. And you're
Right.
going to get a lot of silences, or you're going to get a lot of no's, explicit no's. And like if you're not expecting that and you're not okay with that, like it might, like honestly, the harsh me would be like, this isn't for you.
Right. Hmm.
You have to be okay with that. You
Yeah.
have to be resilient because there's going to be 1,000 times that pressure and that negativity one day when you are successful.
Hmm.
By the way, like there is a lot of stuff that you're constantly dealing with. I can't stress that enough. The problems exist out of everywhere. It's just you're just dealing with a living, breathing business. There's always going to be things that happen, and so it's that idea of like getting back up and falling and getting back up and falling, getting back up. To me, after doing this for so many years, it gives me a lot of energy. So when I'm dealing with something and I'm falling off, like I get energy being like, this is making me stronger. And
Right.
I know that because I know that the next time this happens to me, it's either not going to happen to me again because I'm going to know how to avoid it, or I'm going to deal with it so much more, impactfully and with more strength than I did this time. And so that's kind of what I remember. I feel like building a business in a lot of ways is like you have to be an athlete, like sometimes like, and I say this to my team too, it's like different teams sometimes are in the different spotlight, right? And where we're all on the same team, but like you're kind of in different spotlights.
Hmm.
You're also having to build resilience. You're also having to train. You have to practice. You have to, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. And that's all part of the sport, and I do think the resilience is and the endurance is like half the battle.
I love your perspective on that. And I just the other day I saw, I mean, it's like one of those like kind of cheesy inspirational quote things, but it said like no stands for next opportunity. And I love that type of
Yeah,
perspective you have because
totally.
like you have to be willing to take it. And I think even when people ask me like and they want to get into content creation, they're like, okay, but well, how do you know, like handle the hate comments? I'm like, you have to be ready for it. Like you're gonna get 50% bad comments, 50% some videos might be like all
Hmm.
hate comments. Like it's just
Hmm.
the way it goes and it's just part of the
Yeah,
industry. So
yeah,
I think you
yeah.
have an amazing perspective on that. Kind of switching gears to going back to Cocokind and how that all started. Did you know that you wanted to get into the beauty space or did that kind of like where did that idea evolve for you?
Yeah, it was totally not in my ambition. As a girl growing up, I had really bad skin. I just dealt with a lot of acne
Hmm.
and or like bad skin, right? Like I had a lot of acne.
Yeah.
I had cystic acne. I had it on my face, my chest, my back. Like it was like a big thing. Like, to prom, it had to like cover up my back, or I had to wear high back shirts in the summer. Like I was really insecure about my skin. I would avoid going to like daytime parties in college because I just like felt like, it just like my skin was like too much in the sunlight and spotlight and it would get red and blotchy and,
Mhm.
was really, really, really insecure about it. So like having a beauty company is literally the last thing on earth that I thought that I would have a business
Okay.
doing. And when I think about when I talk about my parents like questioning it, like they never questioned me as a business person or like an entrepreneur, but they definitely had questions for me when I said that I was starting a skincare company because they
Okay.
knew I didn't have perfect skin. I still had really like
Yeah.
break prone skin and I was dealing with still cystic acne when I started Cocokind. And so they were just like, but why like like and they knew
Yeah.
insecurity. So, definitely not. I think though my issues with my skin and my skincare and all that I dealt with there led me to this like deep exploration of products and ingredients and skin barrier and hydration and just like my skin had become so sensitized that like I would put on lotion in the dark because it would sting so badly my eyes would water and my skin would become bright red and then I would take so much foundation and I would just cover it all up with a brush and then I wouldn't be comfortable leaving the door, not even to like literally get food delivery in the lobby of my building in New York without doing that. um it was such a horrible process for me that I just like had learned so much and I had spent so much money and all of that kind of led me to being like secretly really passionate about skincare, but I never told people because again, you see someone who has like acne all over and they tell you they're passionate about skincare, like, you're just like asking for people to stare at your skin and that would make me feel so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So honestly, a lot of the reason why when I quit JP Morgan and I told people that I was starting a distribution business for natural and organic food. I didn't even feel comfortable telling people. And this is kind of going back to my learning of like my advice for people, right? Like I didn't even feel comfortable. But I would say that was more from a skin perspective, my like big insecurity with my skin
Hmm.
of telling people that I was starting a skincare business. And I ultimately convinced myself that I was going to do this by saying that I was going to be like super behind the scenes and I never had to be in front of a camera like this. And so, that's kind of like I just all my issues with skin and skincare led to, me really feeling like I could build a skincare product and company differently. And, at a really like nice price point that wasn't gonna like break the bank
Hmm.
and sold in accessible retailers with really good ingredient first, kind of philosophy, investing in the formula, not on crazy packaging, so that, people who really had skin problems like I did, like knew that they were getting something that they were paying for, not something else. And so ultimately, like that kind of led me to start Cocokind and decide to do it, even if I was like kind of like incognito for a little bit.
Right. Thank you for opening up about all of that. I really appreciate you sharing your story and I I definitely relate to a lot of it because as someone who like struggles with hormonal acne and I'm like in the midst of my whole journey,
Hmm.
it doesn't take away from the fact of what I know about skin, like being in chemical engineering. I've worked in R&D for skincare. Like I think I understand skincare really well.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, I'm just like going through a lot of change with my hormone imbalance and everything, which is obviously react like making my skin react. And I have felt like kind of what you mentioned there, that like judgment when I do mention to people, one, that I like, am like a beauty creator, and then two, now that I've just launched a skincare brand, sometimes like for people who don't know me personally or don't follow my content, they do look at me a bit weird because they're like,
Yeah.
why would I kind of take advice from you? But I think
Yeah.
those of us who have struggled with our skin kind of know it best because they're, like we're very
Yeah.
careful about what we apply because there's so much sensitivity and anything can kind of cause like additional breakouts and stuff. So, um, no, it's great to hear that. Not that you struggled with that, but like that you kind of overcame that and
Yeah.
decided to build something differently. I do want to ask, just out of curiosity, what was the inspiration behind the name Cocokind?
It's like super random, but one, somebody had told me that brands that start with C are more so likely to be successful. Like definitely, I don't even remember who told me that. It definitely was not anybody of like experience or something. It was probably like some super random thing I heard. And I didn't know. So I was like, sure. And then I really like the word kind. And so then I was kind of like, okay, like I just was like, alliteration sounds great. And it was like Cocokind. And that was basically how it started.
That's cool. I like it.
Yeah.
I mean, like it's a cute name. I think it's definitely fitting for the brand. I guess like with, obviously the beauty industry, it's a very saturated place. So was there any fear for you like entering that market, or again, did that kind of play back into that naive kind of, look that you had on things when you entered the space?
Yeah, I think it was naive. Also, when I started, it was 20, 15. Like, so actually it was, wasn't nearly as saturated as it today. Like the industry has
Right.
changed so much in 8, 9 years. So, so yeah, like there was more space then. Today, I do think it's hard for people to like, unless you're coming with a specific angle that's different or unsaturated in some for some reason. I do
Hmm.
think it's hard, just to start a skincare brand today. And I'm really open about the fact that if I started today, I don't think I would have been successful. Like I think timing is important.
Right.
Um, and it is an environment today that is really daunting, for sure.
Hmm. No, yeah, you're definitely right. I know a lot of people kind of talk about that now. And I mean, since you did start in 2015, did you have to kind of go through like transitions with like taking on social media and learning that aspect of things with your branding as well?
Yeah, totally. I mean, when I started, Instagram was like brand new. I barely had my own personal Instagram.
Right.
And my personal Instagram, it was like at that age where it was like, oh, you get like 10 likes per
Yeah.
photo. Like literally you're like 10 friends.
Yeah.
Because some of your friends aren't on it yet. Like it was like
Right.
that. And so and yeah, like it was also at the age where people were really using hashtags.
Mhm.
So I would like go and hashtag like skincare or like go and like see the hashtag skincare and I would like thousands of posts and just hoping that people would follow based on seeing me like their post or comment or it was like back in the day like that, right? Like stuff
Right.
really on like that. And it wasn't even until 2017 where stories existed. So stories didn't even exist.
Hmm.
So 2 years into it, stories existed. And that's actually when I finally started to be in front of the camera. It wasn't because I wanted to. It's because like, oh well, there's a stories thing, and like I have to do it.
Hmm.
So like no one else is gonna do it, and I don't have anybody else to do it. So I basically started doing it, and I would show people what happened. Like if I had a breakout, which I would still have many breakouts, I would show people how I was caring for it, and it was because of stories that I became so much more comfortable not wearing makeup because I would do that and. Initially I'm like, okay, well, I have like, I had followers at that point, maybe like 20,000 followers or something on the account. And it wasn't a little, but it was like, okay, well, stories is only going to reach like, a couple thousand people. So it's not that big of a deal. So I like
Yeah.
commit and it like goes away. So I do these tutorials and like, I would literally get like more DMs than we get back today in our stories. Like I would get 100 100 DMs back of like, oh, thank you for showing me how to use this product. Thank you for showing your real skin. Like I'm dealing with this breakout too. Or like, haha, that was so funny. Like, because I would just be myself and like
Yeah.
I wasn't intending to be in front of the camera, but people gave me so much affirmation, as I'm sure you get too, right? It's like all the people who judge you, and then it just takes like the one or two or the 100
Mhm.
people who comment on your post being like, thank you so much for showing your real skin.
Yeah.
That's why you keep doing it. That's why it should exist. And so like I became so much more comfortable through doing that. And then I would like literally within a year, I was like going on stories and all this stuff, like with no makeup, none
Mhm.
whatsoever, like, and that was never something that, like, again, I would put on makeup just to get food delivery,
Right.
like to open the door. Like couldn't imagine like doing that online. And so I really credit social media and the business for like helping me become really confident, not really, but like confident in my skin, even when I, didn't feel like it was the best. And so, yeah, I absolutely had to grow with social media.
That's great to hear. And I think especially like, even 2017, there weren't really any like skin positivity, people posting things like now, like as you said, like people always comment on my stuff saying like I never see this, but I think now
Yeah.
there are more people who do what I do, but back then, like I don't think anyone
No.
was really doing anything like that. So that's amazing that you kind of grew into that and that it helped also build your confidence more as well. And that's one of the best parts I think about social media and one of those great aspects that it can bring is just making that community build really strong and then which can also help with everyone's confidence because I'm sure as you were boosting up your own confidence, whoever was watching the video is also getting
Yeah,
that boost of confidence from that as well. So
exactly.
that's super cool. I
Yeah.
guess moving on to the next thing that I want to touch on before we end here, and obviously, the theme of this podcast is breaking down those walls of beauty standards. What are some of your goals, I think, with Cocokind that you have already done and then you want to keep moving forward with to bring your message out and be different from the rest of the beauty industry?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think a core like defining reason for existence for Cocokind is the idea of like meeting people where they are and making people feel enough. Like that is like, I think it's tough in the beauty industry because you're constantly comparing, you're seeing images, you're seeing other people, the biggest creators in the space today, there's we're still selling an image, we're
Yeah,
still selling it's still the thing that sells the most, right? Is like the idea of like get this to feel that.
yeah.
And I think that's what I've always really struggled with, and I've always really felt like an outsider on because like I was so tired of that and like don't want to participate in that. And that's why we do keep a little bit of like our identity as like beauty industry outsiders because we don't feel that way, and we don't want to contribute to that. And so it's the small things of like just not using a filter or and having people commit to not using filters. Like I think that's so huge and so understated, like the impact that filters have on everybody's like sense of reality when it comes to skin.
Absolutely.
It's really crazy. And I know it's like harmless. It seems harmless, but it is like actually not harmless, especially for the girl who is 15 and dealing with a lot of acne growing up in Michigan and
Mhm.
feeling like I couldn't, go to prom because of that, right? Like,
Yeah.
so, I think that that's kind of like one of the biggest things of just like we want to be a brand that like is really always approaching our customers and our community with a lot of warmth and acceptance, and making them feel like enough, at
Mhm.
the end of the day. And that I think is like a core part of like why we exist. I think, secondarily, I think in beauty there's people can pay for whatever they want. Sometimes people want to pay for the brand and the celebrity marketing. People want to pay for the packaging. And I think there is room for brands that exist because of like ingredients and
Mhm.
formula. And that's where, I feel like for us, like we still offer like a superior formula at the price point that we're at the channels that we're at, and that I think is like still gonna like allow us to have so much of the community that we've built because people try the products and they really do get the results. Like it's not a fluff,
Yeah.
product. So So yeah, so like in that way, I think it's like, important to kind of like people can choose to pay whatever they want. Like for Cocokind, like it is going to be about like the formula and the ingredients.
I love that. I love that whole message. And I was really excited to talk to you today, but with everything you said, I like this episode makes me even more excited because I really value all of your viewpoints, and especially even with the filters. I've done like a full episode just on like how filters can really,
Mm-hmm.
mess with your
I
confidence in ways
saw
that
that. Yeah.
you don't even think about it, like
No.
'cause it does seem so harmless, right? Like, oh, I threw on a fun little filter, especially like when they started out, right? Like on like Snapchat and stuff, it was like the dog filter, like they were just like fun, harmless filters, but it's evolved into something where it makes people feel like they cannot show up without them, or it further instills that comparison game because you don't even know when someone is wearing a filter at this point,
Yeah.
right? So
I
it's
mean, you've been in this scenario before, I'm sure, where you have met someone in real life and you were like, "Oh, they have like a normal fine
yeah,
line just like I do, or they
yeah,
have a normal like
hmm,
texture just like I do," and you would have never known. And I'm
yeah,
like, honestly, it feels bad, but they're relieving to me because I'm like, "Oh, okay, like I'm not just like on
yeah,
my own, like,
yeah,
like, but I feel bad saying that, like I'm relieved that she has wrinkles, but it's like, it's you don't see that online. You
no,
really don't. And it's like that is to me, it's like the only person it impacts is you when you're looking at yourself, in your mirror and the self-talk that you have. And that is, I just know from example, right? Of like being that little girl or that young woman in my formative years, like how much it hurt me psychologically. And I think that's like it's a hard place that social media is contributing to.
definitely. But I love what you're doing with Cocokind, and I think everyone probably feels that like aura of just like a safe space to kind of come to and use
Yeah,
products. And there is that like pressure, like you mentioned as well, especially when you're dealing with acne, to like always just there's this pressure to like heal it and get rid of your acne like as fast as possible, not
yeah,
only from yourself, but like also from the outside. And when you're buying products and you have this like hope that this will just be the miracle product, I think that just leads into like such a toxic cycle.
oh, totally,
So
totally,
you just being transparent of like this is the product, this is ingredient base, like and all of that. Like I love that, and I think overall it's definitely a huge benefit to the beauty industry and more brands. We need that from much more brands to kind of show
totally.
that. And like
Yeah,
you said, like there's brands for different reasons. Ones that are celebrity endorsed, or are really like a lifestyle type brand where people are buying that brand for the brand, or
yeah,
in this case, right, like more of the community aspect and really the message that you have with it. So that's great to hear. And I guess the last thing I want to ask you, which I ask all guests on this podcast, is what is something that you love about your skin today?
that's I love that question. And I've heard you ask that before, which is so nice. I think I'm really like I have this like hilarious saying on my smooth forehead club, like because of my retinol, we have a retinol in the line, and like it's just something that like I feel like my forehead has like a nice smooth glow to it these days that it didn't have before, and I'm really happy about my my smooth forehead.
I love that. That's awesome. Well, thank you, Priscilla, so much for coming on Loud Talk with Lavi. It was so great talking to you and getting to know you, and I'm sure anyone listening can say the same. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.
This was great. Well, to anyone listening, thank you for getting loud with us. You can check out new episodes every single Sunday at 7 a.m. MST on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and all streaming platforms. I love you guys all so, so much, and you'll hear from me in the next episode of Loud Talk with Lavi. Bye, everyone.
Bye.